Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
When I first met Emily, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. She was smart, beautiful, and had this incredible energy that drew people to her. We met at a charity event through mutual friends, and by the end of the night, we were inseparable. For a guy who hadn't dated much since losing my wife, Lydia, 6 years ago, Emily felt like a breath of fresh air, a sign that maybe, just maybe, I could find happiness again. At first, it seemed like Emily was everything I could want in a partner. She was charming and supportive, and she made an effort to connect with my kids, Sophie and Ben. They were my entire world, and seeing her take an interest in them made me believe she could fit seamlessly into our lives. But as the months passed, small cracks began to show. Sophie, at 12, was at that delicate stage of preteen awkwardness, sharp-tongued one minute, painfully shy the next. Ben, 2 years younger, was quieter, still adjusting to the idea of sharing his dad with someone new. Emily tried to bond with him at first, organizing family outings and helping with homework. But her patience wore thin quickly, especially when the kids didn't immediately warm to her. They're still adjusting, I'd say, whenever she expressed frustration. It's a big change for them. I get that, she'd reply, her tone clipped. But I feel like they're not even trying. It's like they don't want me here. Her words stung, but I brushed them off, chalking it up to her wanting to be accepted. The first real red flag came during a weekend trip to the mountains. We'd rented a cabin for the four of us, hoping it would give us a chance to bond. Sophie, who loved nature, had been excited about hiking, while Ben had been looking forward to roasting marshmallows by the fire. But by the end of the trip, the tension was palpable. Sophie had snapped at Emily during a hike, frustrated when Emily dismissed her interest in birdwatching as boring. Later, when Ben accidentally spilled hot chocolate on Emily's sweater, she barely hid her irritation, muttering, "Can't they be more careful?" Back at home, she let out a heavy sigh as soon as the kids were out of earshot. "I'm trying, Mark. I really am. But your kids make everything so difficult." "They're kids," I said, keeping my tone even. "They're going to have their moments. You just have to be patient." Emily didn't respond, but the look on her face said it all. Patience wasn't her strong suit. Things escalated further when Emily moved in 6 months later. I had hoped that sharing a space would help us grow closer as a family. Instead, it seemed to highlight every flaw in our dynamic. Emily started nitpicking the kids over small things: unmade beds, forgotten chores, TV shows she deemed too loud. Sophie, fiercely independent, pushed back, leading to frequent arguments. Ben, ever the peacemaker, tried to stay out of it, but I could see the stress wearing on him. "Your kids don't respect me," Emily said one night after Sophie stormed off to her room. "They're adjusting," I replied, trying to stay calm. "You can't expect everything to be perfect right away." "Well, maybe they need structure," she said, crossing her arms. "Maybe they'd benefit from some time away. A boarding school, perhaps?" Her words stopped me cold. "Boarding school?" I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. "It's not a bad idea," she said quickly. "They'd get a great education, and it would give us a chance to focus on building our life together. They could come home for holidays. It's not like I'm suggesting we send them away forever." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "Emily, they've already lost their mom. Do you really think sending them away is the answer?" "It's just a suggestion," she said with a shrug. "I'm thinking about what's best for everyone." But was she? As I lay in bed that night, Emily's words replayed in my head. For the first time, I wondered if we wanted the same things, if she truly understood what it meant to step into the role of a step-parent. What would you do if the person you loved didn't see your kids as part of the life you were building together? Would you try to make it work? Or would you face the possibility that love might not be enough? Let me know, because for me, this was the moment everything started to unravel. The dinner table was quiet, save for the clinking of silverware against plates. It had been a long day, and I was looking forward to a rare moment of calm with Emily and the kids. Sophie was pushing her peas around her plate, clearly trying to avoid eating them, while Ben was absorbed in his favorite subject, dinosaurs. "Did you know the Argentinosaurus was the biggest dinosaur ever?" he said excitedly. "It was as long as 3 buses." "Fascinating, Ben," Emily said, though her tone lacked enthusiasm. She gave me a pointed look, the kind that said she had something to discuss, but didn't want to do it in front of the kids. After dinner, I ushered Sophie and Ben upstairs to get ready for bed. Once they were settled, I returned to the dining room, where Emily was waiting with a glass of wine in hand. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight. "Okay," I said cautiously, sitting down across from her. She took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. Mark, I've been thinking a lot about our future, about what it's going to look like once we're married. Me too, I said, smiling. I want this to work, Emily. For all of us. She nodded but didn't return the smile. That's the thing. I don't think it's working the way things are now. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? She hesitated for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. Mark, I love you. I really do. But your kids, they're making things difficult. And I don't see how we can build a life together when they're constantly in the way. In the way? I repeated, my voice rising slightly. I'm not trying to be cruel, she said quickly. But they're demanding, Mark. Sophie is defiant, and Ben, well, he's sweet, but he's so clingy. It's exhausting. They're kids, Emily, I said, struggling to keep my tone calm. They're still figuring out how to deal with all these changes. It's a lot for them. I get that, she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. But I've been thinking maybe what they need is a change of environment. Somewhere they can thrive without all this tension. I froze, her meaning sinking in. You're talking about boarding school? I said, my voice low. She nodded. There are some incredible schools out there, Mark. Places where they get a top-tier education and learn independence. It could be really good for them. And where would that leave us? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She took another sip of wine, her eyes steady on mine. It would give us space to focus on our marriage, on building a life together. It felt like a punch to the gut. Emily, they've already lost their mother. I'm not going to send them away just to make things easier for us. It's not just about us, she said, her voice sharpening. It's about Jason, too. Jason? I asked, confused. My brother, she said. He needs a place to stay. He's been going through a rough patch, and I told him he could move in with us for a while. I stared at her, stunned. You told him that without even asking me? I didn't think it would be a big deal, she said defensively. He's family, Mark, and he's struggling. It's the least we can do. So let me get this straight, I said, my anger bubbling to the surface. You want me to send my kids away so your unemployed brother can move in? Don't twist this, she snapped. Jason needs a fresh start, and this is the perfect opportunity. Your kids will be fine, Mark. They'll adapt. And honestly, it's not like you'd be abandoning them. They'd still come home for holidays. I pushed my chair back, standing up abruptly. This isn't happening, Emily. I'm not sending Sophie and Ben away just to make room for your brother. That's not how this works. Her eyes narrowed. So you're choosing them over me? This isn't a competition, I said, my voice rising. They're my kids, Emily. My responsibility. I can't just ship them off because it's inconvenient for you. She stood up too, crossing her arms. Well, maybe it is a competition. Because I can't marry you if this is how it's going to be, Mark. I won't spend the rest of my life being second to your kids. Her words hung in the air like a storm cloud. You don't have to be second, I said finally. But you do have to accept that they're part of my life. A permanent part. She shook her head, her jaw tight. Then you need to make a decision, Mark. It's them or me. And I need an answer soon. Emily walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, stunned and heartbroken. How had it come to this? What would you do if someone you loved forced you to choose between them and your children? Could you find a way to make it work? Or would you have to let go? Let me know, because for me, the choice wasn't as clear as I thought it would be. That night, sleep didn't come. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Emily's ultimatum replaying in my mind like a broken record. It's them or me. Her words echoed with a weight I couldn't escape, pressing down on my chest until it felt like I could barely breathe. In the darkness, my thoughts drifted to Lydia. It had been 6 years since she passed, but the memory of her was as vivid as ever. I could still hear her laugh when Sophie made a silly joke or feel her hand on my shoulder when Ben fell asleep in my arms as a baby. Lydia had been my rock, my compass, the glue that held our family together. When the cancer came, it didn't just take her life. It took the foundation we'd built together. In her absence, I'd made a promise to raise Sophie and Ben with the love and stability Lydia would have wanted for them. I sat up, running a hand through my hair. The promises I'd made to Lydia weren't just empty words. They were commitments I carried every day since she'd been gone. I remembered her sitting in the hospital bed, frail but smiling as she held my hand. They're going to need you, she'd said, her voice barely a whisper. Be their constant, Mark, no matter what. Those words had become my mantra. Through the sleepless nights, the tearful mornings, and the first without her, first birthdays, first report cards, first Christmases, I'd done my best to be the father they needed. And now, Emily wanted me to send them away. My mind wandered to the day Sophie started middle school. She'd been so nervous, clutching her backpack as if it were a lifeline. "What if nobody talks to me?" she'd asked, her voice trembling. "You're going to be amazing," I'd said, kneeling to her level. "And even if it's tough at first, I'll be here waiting for you when you get home. Always." That day, when she ran to me after school, tears streaming down her face because someone had teased her about her glasses, I held her and reminded her of her worth. And Ben, my sweet, curious Ben, he'd been glued to my side since he could walk, always asking questions, always seeking reassurance. When he had nightmares about monsters under the bed, it was my voice that calmed him. When he got his first bike, it was my hand he clung to before he dared to ride on his own. They didn't just need me, I needed them. Emily's suggestion wasn't just a betrayal of my promise to Lydia. It was a betrayal of who I was as a father. The more I thought about it, the more Emily's ultimatum began to take on a darker shape. It wasn't just a single bad decision. It was part of a pattern I'd been too blind to see. There were the subtle comments she'd made about Sophie's attitude and Ben's clinginess, as if their personalities were flaws to be corrected. There was the way she'd stopped including them in plans that were supposed to be family outings, subtly but unmistakably drawing a line between her and them. And now, she wanted to ship them off so her brother, her grown, unemployed brother, could move in. Was this really someone I wanted to marry? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of muffled crying. I got out of bed, my heart sinking as I followed the sound to Sophie's room. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, I saw her sitting on her bed, hugging her knees. "Hey," I said softly, stepping inside. She looked up, quickly wiping her tears. "I'm fine," she said, her voice shaky. I sat down beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Sophie hesitated, then whispered, "Am I really going to boarding school?" Her question hit me like a punch to the gut. "No," I said firmly. "You're not going anywhere." She sniffled, her big brown eyes searching mine. "But Emily said it would be better for us, that we'd like it." I felt a surge of anger, but forced myself to stay calm. "Emily doesn't know what's best for you," I said. "I do. And I promise you, Sophie, you and Ben are staying right here with me. Always." She nodded, leaning into my side as her tears began to subside. As I held her, I knew my choice was clear. Lydia's voice echoed in my mind. "Be there constant, Mark. No matter what. How far would you go to keep a promise to someone you've lost? Would you sacrifice your own happiness for the people who need you most? Let me know, because for me, this was the moment I realized I had to stand my ground, no matter the cost." The morning after Sophie's tearful question, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. I couldn't keep ignoring the issue or hoping it would resolve itself. Emily's ultimatum hung over me like a storm cloud, and there was no escaping it. When Emily came into the kitchen, dressed impeccably as always, I knew it was time. She poured herself a cup of coffee and smiled at me like nothing was wrong. "Emily," I said, keeping my voice steady, "we need to talk." Her smile faltered, replaced by the wary look she wore whenever she thought I was about to criticize her. "About what?" "About Sophie and Ben," I said, setting down my own mug. "And this boarding school idea." She sighed, already defensive. "Mark, I told you. It's for the best. They'll get a great education, and we'll finally have the space to focus on us." "It's not for the best," I said firmly. "And it's not happening." Her eyes narrowed. "So, that's it? You're not even willing to consider it?" "No," I said, "because it's wrong. They've already been through enough. I'm not going to send them away just to make things easier for us." Emily set her cup down with a sharp clink, crossing her arms. "You're acting like I'm trying to hurt them. I'm trying to help, Mark. You can't keep coddling them forever." "They're not being coddled," I said, my frustration bubbling over. "They're being loved. There's a difference." Emily's expression darkened. "Do you even hear yourself? You're so wrapped up in them that you can't see how toxic this dynamic is. Sophie is rude and manipulative, and Ben, well, he's sweet, but he clings to you like a lifeline. They need independence, Mark." Her words hit me like a slap. "Sophie is 12, Emily. Ben is 10. Of course they depend on me. That's what kids do. They're supposed to feel safe with their parent." "And what about me?" she snapped. "When do I get to feel safe? When do I get to be your priority?" "You are a priority," I said, trying to stay calm. "But you're asking me to abandon my kids, Emily. You're asking me to choose between them and you, and that's not fair." Her jaw tightened. "You're twisting my words." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm hearing them loud and clear. And what I'm hearing is that you resent Sophie and Ben." Her silence was deafening. "Just admit it," I said, my voice softening. "You don't want to be their stepmom. You don't want to share your life with them." "I don't hate them," she said finally, though her tone was cold. But I don't love them either, and I don't think I ever will. The honesty of her words hit harder than I expected. I appreciate you telling me the truth, I said, my heart sinking. But if that's how you feel, we have a problem. Because I can't marry someone who doesn't want to be part of my kids' lives. Emily's face hardened. So, you're really going to throw this away? After everything we've been through? I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm trying to protect my family. And if you can't be part of that, I am part of your family, she interrupted. Or at least I'm supposed to be. But you're making it impossible. You've been putting them first since the day we met. When do I get to come first, Mark? You don't come first because they're my kids, I said, the words escaping before I could soften them. They lost their mom. They're still healing. And I'm not going to tear them apart just to make you happy. Emily stood there, staring at me, her chest rising and falling with each angry breath. So, that's it, she said finally, her voice cold. You're choosing them over me. This isn't a choice, I said. It's a responsibility. You knew that when we got engaged. She shook her head, her eyes blazing. Fine. You have 48 hours to figure out what you want. Either you send them to boarding school and make this work, or the wedding is off. I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. You're giving me an ultimatum? I'm giving you a chance to prioritize us, she said, her voice steely. But I'm not waiting forever, Mark. You need to decide. With that, she grabbed her bag and stormed out of the house, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen. What would you do if the person you loved forced you into an impossible choice? Would you fight to save the relationship or walk away for the sake of your values? Let me know, because for me, the clock was ticking and the decision felt heavier with each passing second. The house was quieter than usual. Emily's ultimatum hung over me like a heavy fog, but the absence of her voice brought an odd sort of peace. For the first time in days, I could think clearly without the constant tension pressing down on me. Still, I couldn't shake the knot in my stomach. 48 hours to decide the future of my family. It felt cruel and manipulative, yet part of me still hoped there was a way to salvage things. I needed perspective. I called Alex, my best friend since college. If anyone could cut through the noise and tell me the truth, it was him. We met at our usual spot, a low-key diner where we'd spent countless nights hashing out life's problems over coffee and pie. So, Alex said, leaning back in the booth. What's going on? You sounded stressed on the phone. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. It's Emily. She wants me to send Sophie and Ben to boarding school. Alex's brow furrowed. What? Why? She says it's for their own good, I said, my voice tinged with bitterness. But really, it's so her brother can move in with us. She gave me an ultimatum. Either I send the kids away, or the wedding's off. Alex let out a low whistle. Wow, that's a lot to unpack. I nodded, staring down at my coffee. I don't even know where to start. I love her, Alex, but I can't do this to my kids. I promised Lydia I'd always put them first. And you should, Alex said firmly. Look, man, I get that you love Emily. But love doesn't mean sacrificing your values or your kids' well-being. If she really cared about you, she wouldn't be putting you in this position. I looked up at him, surprised by the conviction in his voice. She knew what she was signing up for, Alex continued. You're a package deal, Mark. If she can't accept that, she's not the right person for you. His words hit me hard. For so long, I'd been trying to balance everything. Emily's needs, the kids' adjustment, my own grief, without realizing how much I'd been compromising. Do you think I've been blind to this? I asked. I think you've been giving her the benefit of the doubt, Alex said carefully. And there's nothing wrong with that. But this ultimatum? It's not about the kids or her brother. It's about control. She's testing how far you're willing to bend for her. That evening, I stopped by my late wife, Lydia's mother's house. Marilyn had always been a steady presence in my life, even after Lydia passed. She adored Sophie and Ben and had become a second mother to me in many ways. When she opened the door, her face lit up with a warm smile. Mark, what a surprise. Come in. I sat at her kitchen table, the smell of freshly baked cookies filling the air. Marilyn always seemed to know when comfort food was needed. What's on your mind? She asked, pouring me a cup of tea. I explained everything. Emily's ultimatum, her resentment toward the kids, and the impossible choice she was forcing on me. Marilyn listened intently, her hands folded on the table. When I finished, she took a deep breath. Mark, she said softly, you already know the answer. I looked at her confused. Do I? You're a good father, she said, and a good man. Lydia knew that when she married you, and I've seen it every day since she's been gone. You've built a life for Sophie and Ben that's full of love and stability. Don't let anyone take that away from them. Or from you. Her words brought tears to my eyes. I just don't want to feel like I'm giving up on Emily, I admitted. Sometimes letting go is the kindest thing you can do, Marilyn said. For you and for her. That night, I sat at my desk and began drafting a letter to Emily. I poured my heart into it, explaining why I couldn't send Sophie and Ben to boarding school and why her ultimatum had hurt me so deeply. I told her I loved her, but that my kids came first, and I couldn't marry someone who didn't understand that. The words didn't come easily, but they came honestly. By the time I finished, I felt a sense of relief like a weight had been lifted. The next morning, as I prepared to send the letter, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Emily was standing there, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk," she said, stepping inside before I could respond. "How do you handle a confrontation when the stakes are this high? Can love survive when trust and respect are on the line? Let me know, because for me, this was the moment where everything hung in the balance." Emily stood in the doorway, her eyes scanning my face for answers as if she could extract them before I even spoke. She hadn't come unprepared. Her perfectly styled hair and confident posture told me she was here to win. "Mark," she began, her voice calm but clipped. "I've been patient. I've given you time to think this through, but I need an answer now." I took a deep breath, stepping aside to let her in. The air between us felt electric, the tension impossible to ignore. "Emily," I said, keeping my voice steady, "we need to talk." "That's what I'm here for," she said, sitting down on the couch and crossing her legs. Her calm demeanor was a sharp contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I sat across from her, leaning forward with my elbows on my knees. "I've thought about everything you said, and I can't send Sophie and Ben to boarding school." Her composure cracked slightly, her jaw tightening. "Mark, this isn't just about the kids. It's about our future. I'm trying to give us a chance to build a life together." "I know you believe that," I said, choosing my words carefully. "But sending them away isn't the solution. They've already lost their mom. I can't take their home away from them, too." Emily's expression darkened. "You're making this sound like I want to hurt them. That's not fair, Mark. I'm thinking about what's best for everyone, including you." "No," I said firmly, shaking my head. "You're thinking about what's best for you and your brother. And I can't let my kids pay the price for that." Her eyes narrowed, her calm veneer giving way to frustration. "You think I'm being selfish?" she snapped. "Do you know how much I've sacrificed for this relationship? How much I've put up with? Put up with?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "Emily, they're kids. They're not a burden. They're my family. And if you can't accept them, then you can't accept me." Her face flushed with anger. "This isn't about acceptance, Mark. It's about boundaries. Your kids run this house, and you let them. Sophie is rude, Ben is clingy, and neither of them respects me. How am I supposed to feel like I belong here when they clearly don't want me around?" I stood, the frustration boiling over. "They're adjusting to a huge change, Emily. Of course, it's going to take time. But instead of trying to build a relationship with them, you're giving me ultimatums. You're asking me to choose between you and them. And that's not fair." Her voice grew sharper. "Maybe it's not fair, but life isn't fair, Mark. I'm trying to give us a future, but you're so obsessed with being the perfect dad that you can't see what it's costing us." "What it's costing us?" I repeated, my tone incredulous. "Emily, I've been over backward trying to make this work. I've compromised, I've defended you to my kids, and I've done everything I can to make you feel welcome. But this? Asking me to send them away? That's crossing a line." Emily stood too, her fists clenched at her sides. "So, that's it? You're choosing them over me?" "This isn't a choice," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "It's a responsibility. I love you, Emily, but I will not sacrifice my kids' happiness or well-being for anyone." Her eyes filled with tears, but there was no softness in them, only anger. "You're unbelievable," she spat. "You're going to regret this, Mark. You're throwing away everything we've built." "I'm not throwing anything away," I said quietly. "I'm protecting what matters most." Emily grabbed her bag, her movements sharp and deliberate. "You've made your decision," she said coldly. "Don't bother calling me when you realize you've made the wrong one." Without another word, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there for a long moment, my heart pounding as I processed what had just happened. The weight of the decision settled over me, but for the first time in weeks, I felt something unexpected, clarity. Later that evening, Sophie and Ben were sitting in the living room, their attention focused on a movie. I knew I had to tell them what had happened, but the words felt heavy on my tongue. Hey guys, I said, sitting down between them. They paused the movie, both of them looking at me with curious eyes. Emily won't be living with us anymore, I said carefully. We've decided not to get married. Sophie's face lit up with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Really? Ben, ever the empath, frowned. Are you okay, Dad? I smiled, pulling them both into a hug. I'm okay, I said. As long as I have you too, I'll always be okay. What happens when love and family collide? Can you truly prioritize both? Or does one always have to come first? Let me know, because for me, this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where my kids came first no matter what. The days after Emily stormed out were a blur of quiet adjustments. The house felt lighter, like it had shed a weight it had been carrying for far too long. Even the kids seemed more at ease, though I could see the questions lingering in their eyes. I knew I needed to talk to them, not just about Emily, but about everything. They deserved reassurance, clarity, and most importantly, a reminder that no matter what, they would always come first. That evening, after dinner, I called Sophie and Ben into the living room. They sat on the couch, their faces a mixture of curiosity and concern. Okay, I began, taking a deep breath. I know things have been a little tense lately, and I want you both to know that everything is going to be okay. Sophie tilted her head, her arms crossed. So, you and Emily are really done? Yes, I said simply. We decided not to get married. Ben frowned. Because of us? No, I said quickly, shaking my head. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. Emily and I just had different ideas about what our family should look like, and in the end, we couldn't make it work. Sophie looked at me skeptically. She wanted to send us away, didn't she? Her directness caught me off guard, but I nodded. Yes, she thought boarding school might be good for you. But I didn't agree, and I never will. Ben's eyes widened. You mean we're staying here? With you? Always, I said firmly. This is your home, and you're not going anywhere. I promised your mom I'd give you a life full of love and stability, and I'm going to keep that promise. Sophie's expression softened, and she leaned against me. Thanks, Dad, she said quietly. I was scared you might actually send us away. I wrapped an arm around her and ruffled Ben's hair. Never, I said. You two were stuck with me. For the first time in weeks, we all laughed. It wasn't just a release of tension. It was a reminder of the bond we shared, one that no ultimatum could break. In the following days, I focused on rebuilding that bond. I made an effort to be more present, carving out time for things we loved, family movie nights, trips to the park, and long conversations over dinner. Sophie, who had been keeping her distance since Emily moved in, started opening up again. She told me about her friends, her favorite books, and even her struggles at school. Ben, ever the enthusiast, dragged me into his world of dinosaurs and Legos with renewed energy. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of frustration and grief, but it felt real. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like enough. Emily, however, wasn't ready to let go. At first, it was Tex. You're making a huge mistake. I can't believe you're throwing us away over this. Mark, you're being ridiculous. Call me? When I didn't respond, the messages grew angrier. You're such a coward. I hope your kids are worth it because you've ruined my life. I deleted them all, refusing to engage. Blocking her felt like a final step, one that solidified my decision to prioritize my peace. One night, as I was cleaning out the closet in my bedroom, I came across a small wooden box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were keepsakes from my life with Lydia, photos, mementos, and a few letters we'd written to each other during her hospital stays. I sat on the bed, carefully sifting through the contents until I found a letter with my name on it. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. I unfolded it slowly, the paper worn but the ink still bold. Mark, if you're reading this, it means I'm not there to say these things to you. But I want you to know how much I love you and how proud I am of the father you are. Life is going to get hard. You'll face choices that feel impossible, and you might doubt yourself. But please remember this. You are strong, and you are enough. You have everything you need to give Sophie and Ben the life they deserve. Trust yourself, and trust the love you have for them. That's all that matters. Love always. Lydia. Tears blurred my vision as I read her words. It was as if she had known this moment would come, that I would need her guidance even after she was gone. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the box, a sense of peace washing over me. Lydia had always believed in me, even when I struggled to believe in myself. And now, as I sat there in the quiet of my room, I realized she was right. I had made the right choice. What would you do if faced with an impossible choice between love and family? Would you stand firm in your convictions, or would you risk everything to make it work? Let me know, because for me, this was the moment I truly understood what it meant to be a father. Months had passed since Emily stormed out of our lives. At first, her absence felt like a gaping hole in the routines we'd built. But as the weeks turned into months, the space she left behind became something else entirely: peace. The tension that had hung over our house, turning every interaction into a delicate balancing act, was gone. In its place was a sense of calm I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Sophie and Ben flourished in the new normal. Sophie had started volunteering at the library after school, channeling her love of books into something constructive. Ben had joined a local soccer league, his energy now spent on the field instead of worrying about the dynamics at home. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Sophie looked up from her plate and said, "Dad, you seem happier." I blinked, surprised by her observation. "Do I?" She nodded. "Yeah, it's like you're not stressed all the time anymore." Ben chimed in, his mouth full of spaghetti. "You smile more now." Their words struck a chord. They were right. I was happier. That happiness wasn't just about Emily being gone. It was about what I'd gained in her absence. I'd rebuilt the bond with my kids, a bond that had felt strained during those final months with her. We spent our weekends exploring hiking trails, baking cookies, or just sitting together watching old movies. It wasn't extravagant or groundbreaking, but it was real, and it reminded me of why I'd made the choices I had. I'd also taken tentative steps back into the world of dating. It wasn't something I rushed into. If anything, I was hesitant. I didn't want to bring someone new into our lives unless I was absolutely sure they could embrace the family I'd built. The process was slow, deliberate. Coffee dates with women who understood my priorities, conversations about life, values, and what it meant to be part of a family. One date, a teacher named Claire stood out. She was warm, genuine, and patient, qualities I hadn't realized I was looking for until I found them. But I took things slowly, introducing her to Sophie and Ben only when I was sure it was the right time. Their approval meant everything to me, and to my relief, they liked her. "She's nice," Sophie said after their first meeting. "She actually listens." "Yeah," Ben added. And she laughed at my dinosaur jokes. That's a good sign. Despite the progress I'd made, Emily wasn't completely gone from my life. Every few weeks, she'd send a text or email, each one laced with anger or regret. "I can't believe you chose them over us. You threw away everything we had for no reason. You'll regret this someday." At first, the messages stirred something in me: guilt, frustration, even doubt. But as time went on, they lost their power. Each one was a reminder of why things hadn't worked, why I'd made the choice to walk away. The last message came on a gray Sunday morning, a single line that felt both cryptic and empty. "You'll regret this someday." I stared at the words for a moment, then deleted the message without responding. Life continued. The kids grew more confident, more open, and our little family became stronger than ever. I found joy in the small things: Sophie's laughter when she shared a funny story from school, Ben's determination as he practiced his soccer moves in the backyard, the quiet evenings where we simply existed together as a family. I wasn't naive enough to think everything was perfect. There were still challenges, still moments of doubt. But for the first time in years, I felt like we were on solid ground. One night, as I tucked Ben into bed, he looked up at me and asked, "Dad, do you ever miss her?" It was an honest question, one that caught me off guard. "I think I miss the idea of her," I said after a moment. I wanted so badly for it to work, for us to be a family. But sometimes, wanting something doesn't make it right. He nodded, seeming to accept my answer. "I'm glad you chose us," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "I'll always choose you," I said. "Can you truly love someone who doesn't value what matters most to you?" For me, the answer was clear. Love isn't about sacrifices that break you. It's about building something together, something rooted in respect, understanding, and shared values. And when that's missing, no amount of love can make up for it.